Anybody here like to wait? Anybody like waiting? I'll wait just a little bit longer for y'all to answer the question. Most of us don't like waiting, do we? I know I certainly don't. The other day, a couple of weeks ago, Jamie and I went out to a restaurant. There was a long line of people waiting to be seated. And the waitresses were working as hard as they could. But I couldn't help but notice how many people came in, saw the line, and said, nope, not today, and turned around and left. Waiting, it seems like to be perhaps the hardest discipline of the Christian life. But I'd be willing to bet, as much as, even though most of us don't like waiting, probably every one of us is waiting on something right now. We all have to wait whether we like it or not. And truth be told, most of life is waiting. For example, when you watch a football game on TV, most of the time nothing happens. Now, by rule, football game is 60 minutes of actual playing time. But the average football telecast lasts over 3 hours. According to an article in the Wall Street Journal, the average football telecast, the actual playing of football takes up 11 minutes. If that's true, then what happens the rest of the time? In that 3-hour block of time, you have 60 minutes for commercials. You have 75 minutes when the players are standing around in huddles. You have 14 minutes for replays. You have 20 minutes for halftime. After a few other miscellaneous things are thrown in, such as crowd shots and talking heads in the booth and shots of the cheerleaders, what you're left with is actually 11 minutes of actual football playing time. I take that as a parable of life itself, which simply says the action in life is small, but the waiting is large. We spend most of our time waiting. Well, Joseph is in prison as we turn to Genesis chapter 40. He's in prison not because he did wrong, but because he did right. Here's the single most important fact about Genesis chapter 40. At the beginning of the chapter, we find that Joseph is in jail. At the end of the chapter, Joseph is still in jail. In this chapter, Joseph is waiting because there's nothing else he can do. He can't get out of prison. He can't appeal the sentence, and he certainly can't escape. He's stuck in an Egyptian prison. He's far from home, where most people in the home think he's dead anyway. He's been falsely accused of rape by Potiphar's wife. In a situation like that, you don't have too many friends. So he waits, and he waits, and he waits. Now, because we know how Joseph's life ends up, it's very easy for us to read the story of Joseph in light of how it ends. We know that eventually he emerges triumphantly, and that he will one day say to the brothers who betrayed him, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." Our problem is now, when we read this whole story, or we do read this whole story, as if Joseph knew what the outcome was going to be like. And we know that's not true at all. When Joseph was thrown into the pit by his brothers, he had no idea what was going to happen next. He knew as much about his future as you do about yours. It's not as if God had whispered to him, "Hang tough, kid. Don't let them get you down. Pretty soon you'll be the prime minister of Egypt." None of that happened. This isn't a fairy tale. When Joseph is stuck in prison, he has no inside knowledge as to what's going to happen next. He has no way of knowing how or when or even if he would get out of prison. He certainly knows nothing of the baker and the cupbearer that's coming. So we need to read the story of Joseph as he would have lived it, with no hint of what the future might hold. Now here's a short summary of chapter 40. Joseph is in jail. he encounters two men who have two dreams. Each dream has two separate interpretations. One man lives, one man dies. The man who lives forgets all about Joseph, and Joseph finds himself still in jail. That's the whole chapter right there. Meanwhile, Joseph is waiting to see what will happen next. Warren Wiersbe said this about Joseph's time in prison. He said, God permitted Joseph to be treated unjustly and put in prison to help build his character and prepare him for the task that lay ahead. Prison would soon be a school where Joseph would learn to wait on the Lord. He would learn that God's delays are not God's denials. Now, we all spend a lot of time waiting for something to happen. The simple question then becomes, what do you do while you wait? Well, I think in chapter 40 we find three answers to that question. What do you do while you wait? And the first thing that you do is be faithful. Look in Genesis chapter 40. Let's read verse 1. Then it came about after these things, the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was furious with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, in the jail, the same place where Joseph was in prison. The captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them, and he took care of them, and they were in confinement for some time. Now, we don't know how long Joseph had been in prison when these two arrived on the scene. But it must have been more than a day or two. Perhaps he had been in prison for a few months. Maybe he had been in prison for a couple of years. We just suddenly don't know. But these two new inmates showed up. In thinking about this story, it's very vital that we view it from Joseph's perspective. As far as Joseph is concerned, this is just another day in prison. Even though he may be the leader of the prisoners, he's still imprisoned. He's still confined. He has no hope of getting out. Now, there's no way he could see into the future. The cupbearer would eventually be his ticket out, but he had no way of knowing that at that time. And besides, it didn't happen for at least 2 more years. So what do you do when you're unjustly accused? What do you do when people you trust turn against you? What do you do when your dreams turn to ashes? Even though all those things are true for Joseph, he remained faithful to God and to his duties. Somewhere I once read this quote, "The secret of your future is found in your daily routine." I have absolutely no idea who said that, but it's absolutely true. The things you do every day, especially the little things that make up the routine of life, are the seeds of your future that you sow every day. It reminds me of what the preacher said in Ecclesiastes 9, verse 10. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Eugene Peterson in The Message offers a punchier version of that verse. He said, whatever turns up, grab it and do it. I like that because it emphasizes the unpredictable nature of life. No matter how well you planned your day, no matter how organized you may be, something unexpected is always bound to turn up. When it does, grab it and do it. This verse challenges us to take a hold of the ordinary responsibilities of life and make sure they get done. It's easy for us to live in the never-never land of what we plan to do tomorrow. We dream about starting a diet, or retiring from our job, or buying a new iPad, or meeting someone who will sweep us off our feet, or somehow finish painting the living room, or learning French, or calling on a new client, or any of 1,000 other worthwhile ideas. Meanwhile, there's work to be done. Much of it is tedious, that somehow gets left undone while we're dreaming about what we're going to do someday. Unfortunately, someday never comes for most people. In one of her books, Elizabeth Elliot talks about what to do when you hit a wall and you feel stuck. When that happens, she said, she advises people just to get up and do the next thing because, in her words, there is always a next thing that needs to be done. That's actually good advice. It may be small or it may be trivial, but there's always a next thing that needs to be done. Washing or cleaning, or writing a note, or making a phone call, or paying bills, or cleaning the shelves, or filling an order, or putting gas in the car, picking up the grandkids, or taking your medicines, or saying your prayers, or weeding the garden, or feeding your dog. The list just goes on and on and on of always there's something else needs to be done. Martin Luther King Jr. put it this way: whatever your life's work is, do it well. A man should do his job so well that the living, the dead, and the unborn could do it no better. If it falls to your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures, like Shakespeare wrote poetry, like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. Think of it this way. Because God had his hand upon him, Joseph was promoted by the captain of the prison to be in charge of all the other prisoners. Because he was faithful, he did not shirk from his duty when these two new men entered the prison. Little did he know that by taking care of them, he was advancing the cause of his own freedom. Let's sharpen that for just a minute. I said, little did he know. Reality is, I should have said, it was impossible for him to know. Faithfulness is its own reward. So here's a question for all of us. Will we be faithful where we are, even when life seems to make no sense? Will we be faithful where we are, even when life seems to make no sense? While you're waiting on God, first, be faithful. Second, be ready. Look at verses 5 through 8. Then the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt, who were confined in jail, both had a dream the same night, each man with his own dream, and each dream with his own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning and observed them, behold, they were dejected. And he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his master's house, why are your faces so sad today? Then they said to him, we have had a dream, and there's no one to interpret it. Then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, please. All throughout Joseph's story, there are dreams. First, he had dreams. Now these two have dreams, and we're going to see soon that Pharaoh will have a two-part dream. In each case, the dreams prove crucial in Joseph's life. In Genesis 37, Joseph had dreams that he shared with his brothers, provoking their hatred even more. Here in Genesis 40, it's the baker and the cupbearer who turn to Joseph to help them interpret their dreams. Joseph's willingness to interpret the dreams, though, means that he has not yet given up on his own dreams. Even though many years have passed and he has endured the pain of rejection, enslavement, false accusation, and imprisonment, down deep inside he still believes that one day God will cause those early dreams to come true. Otherwise, he would have said to these two men, my advice is forget about those dreams. They don't mean anything. I had dreams of my own once, and look where I am now. But he didn't say any of that. And notice also he did not say, don't worry, fellas, I'm an expert in dreams. I can figure this out for you. Rather than giving in to despair or relying on false optimism, he points the men to God by simply saying, do not interpretations belong to God? His answer means something like this. There is a God in heaven who gives dreams to men. He and He alone can explain the dreams you had. I don't have the answer in me, but I know the Lord, and He can help you out. Joseph stood out among his generation because he saw God's hand everywhere. He had a big God, and therefore he knew that being in prison was no hindrance to the Almighty. Are you aware of the fact that God does some of His best work in prison? John Bunyan went to prison, and out came Pilgrim's Progress. Dietrich Bonhoeffer went to prison, and out came The Cost of Discipleship. Charles Colson went to prison, and out came the worldwide ministry of prison fellowship. We serve a God who is not stopped by razor wire or high walls. Prison doors can never keep Him out. So Joseph's example leads me to ask this question. Are you ready to serve God right where you are, even when you'd rather be somewhere else? Are you ready to serve God right now, right where you are, even when you'd rather be somewhere else? While we wait on God, we're to be faithful and be ready. But the third thing we're to do when we're waiting on God is to be bold. When you read Genesis 40, you discover that Joseph tells the cupbearer that he will be released in 3 days and restored to his former position. That was the interpretation of his dream. No doubt, the cupbearer was delighted to hear the news. But then Joseph added a personal request. In verse 14, he asked the cupbearer, only keep me in mind when it goes well with you. Please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house. Now, when I was preparing this message, I ran across a Bible teacher who calls this a lack of faith on Joseph's part. I don't agree with that at all. If Joseph had been unfairly treated, and if he's not guilty, then why shouldn't he seek his release? I know if I were in prison and a buddy of mine was about to get out of prison, I'd do two things. First thing I'd do is look at the heavens and say, thy will be done. The second thing I'd do is test my buddy. Hey, don't forget about me. Help me get out of here. We all understand that if you're in prison, you want to get out as soon as you can. And remember, in Joseph's case, he was in prison but had never done anything wrong. On one hand, he is faithful and ready to serve God where he is. But on the other hand, he doesn't want to stay in prison forever. It's as if he's saying, I'm here, but this is not my whole life. I accept where I am for the moment, but I hope to be set free eventually. And 2 years later, his request to the cupbearer will lead to his release. I don't think he ever regretted what he said. The whole episode reminds me of a scene from the movie Shawshank Redemption, where Andy Dufresne, who was put in prison innocently after being falsely accused of murdering his wife and her lover, was talking with his friend Red in the prison yard. They were discussing Andy's hope of getting out of prison someday, when Red, in essence, said, you got to put all that behind you. You got to give it up. Look at us. We'll never get out of here. Andy pauses for a moment, and then he says, it comes down to a simple choice. Get busy living or get busy dying. For over 30 years, Shirley Banta served as church secretary in Oak Park, Illinois. She had a saying that she often repeated, have a blast while you last. That little saying sums up an enormous spiritual truth. Since we won't be here forever, we might as well have a blast while we last. Be bold. Folk singer Joan Baez put it this way, you don't get to choose how you die or when. You only get to choose how you're going to live now. In a few weeks, I will celebrate my 71st birthday. That fact in itself is not notable, but it's good to use your birthday as a means of taking stock of where you are in life. When a man turns 70, it's said he becomes a philosopher of sorts. They say 70 is the new 50. That may be true, but I can tell you it's not the new 30 either. When you turn 70, you can't kid yourself about where you are on your journey. I know I'm closer to the end of my journey than I am at the beginning. But I did read a birthday card when I was looking for a birthday card recently. It said birthdays are good for your health. The more you have, the longer you live. That made me laugh. You won't be here forever. You're going to die of something someday. But don't be fooled into thinking otherwise. So if there's anything else you want to do for God and His kingdom, go and do it now. Don't wait. You won't be here forever. The fact of our coming death can make us timid, or it can make us bold. Go and do it now. Get busy living, or get busy dying. Joseph didn't settle. Joseph said to the cupbearer, "Remember me." It makes perfect sense, because Joseph didn't settle. He was faithful in prison. He was ready in prison. He was bold in prison. So, the question we've been asking all morning, what do you do while you wait? You be faithful, be ready, and be bold. Verse 23 gives us the end of the story. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. That's a bummer. After all that, and all he'd gone through, and after being released 3 days after his dream, the cupbearer forgot about Joseph. That happens all the time in life, though, doesn't it? We all make promises that we don't keep. We intend to stay in touch, but we don't. We plan to call an old friend, but we don't. We say that we'll pray for you, but we don't. The what-ifs of life will kill you. When the cupbearer got out, he promptly left the prison and all those that were in it far behind. Joseph must have had many questions that he was asking himself, especially as he lay down at night. What if the cupbearer never remembers? What if I die in prison? What if I never get to clear my name? The what-ifs of life will kill you. Now put yourself in Joseph's place. The only people that can help him think he's dead, or they think he committed a vile crime, or they have forgotten him completely. What do you do then? Well, it all depends on how big your God is. How big is your God when you've been betrayed, when you've been enslaved, when you've been falsely accused, when you've been in prison? How big is your God when you've been forgotten? Joseph's experience in prison reminds us that God doesn't keep time the same way we do. As Psalm 92 says, He is from everlasting to everlasting. And as Peter said, with the Lord, one day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. Time is of no consequence to God. A.W. Tozer said it this way: God never hurries. There are no deadlines against which he must work. He's never in a hurry. He's never late. He's never behind schedule. And as Jamie likes to add, he's never early either. So what do? We wait on the Lord. Because those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Your Redeemer is on the way. He's just not working on your schedule. Let God be God, and all will be well. So this sermon ends where it began, with Joseph in prison, falsely accused, unjustly and wrongly imprisoned, alone and forgotten. Apparently he's hit a dead end. But remember, his story is not over, for he's about to meet the most powerful man in all the world. So let me ask the key question one more time. Are you willing to wait for God? Let's close. Father God, teach us how to wait on you. You've shown us that we are to be faithful, that we're to be ready, that we're to be bold. Sometimes we think waiting is nothing more than just passing time. But it's not. You've given us a task. And while we wait on you, we do the last task you gave us. And we continue to do it until He's done the best of our abilities. But give us the patience to know how to wait on you. We don't like waiting. But so many times, your waiting is enabling us to grow. It's developing character that within us. It's teaching us that now is not the time. Years may not be the place. But you are orchestrating everything for your good and your glory. So teach us to be patient when we're waiting. Especially when we find ourselves in a place we don't want to be. Maybe like Joseph, we're falsely accused, falsely imprisoned. Or maybe it's because of our own desires. Like Paul, he said he'd rather be with you, but you would rather him be here. So while we're here, while we're waiting on you, use that time to further your kingdom, to further your glory, and to increase within us our dependence upon you. We know your ways are perfect. We know your will is best. So we yield to you. Forgive us when we're impatient. Forgive us when we go out on our own to try to speed things up. And forgive us when we accuse you of not knowing, not caring, or blame you for causing the delay. Help us to remember that you're doing all things in your time for our benefit and for your glory. Like Joseph, may we wait, being faithful, ready, and bold, all for you. This is our prayer in your name.